Assalamu alaikum viewers, a very warm welcome to all of you. You're watching Hidayat TV and I'm Haider with another episode of Generation Gap. Viewers, as you're all aware that we try to talk about those issues which are less highlighted in the mainstream media, and sometimes they try to obfuscate the truth, and also it's our try to present views from different generations so common grounds can be found and difference of opinion can be celebrated. If you want us to talk about some issue which you think is more relevant to our society, please do write to us. Our email is on the screen, and you can also follow us on Twitter. Account is at GenerationGap14. Viewers, since 2001, after 9/11, the governments in the West, and in particular United States, have developed several strategies and plans to combat terrorism. One of the most debated one to date is the use of unmanned aircraft system, also known as drone. There have been surgical strikes as well as signature strikes, and throughout 2013 the US has launched 21 airstrikes in Yemen, 18 so far in Pakistan. Stats are given by Long War Journal, and 365 drone strikes since 2004, killing almost 3,577 people, including 197 children. These figures disputed because US officials will quote a different figure. And in the recent days, we have seen Indian army has been using drone. They have recently violated Pakistani airspace. Israeli military has killed suspected Islamic militants in Egypt recently, and there's a surge of drone strikes in Yemen, and which we saw recently, the week commencing 5th of August. And after that, there was a closure of 19 diplomatic missions all across the world. Gregory Johnson, author of The Lost Refuge, Yemen, Al-Qaeda and Americans' War in Arabia, he writes that the intelligence agencies have reacted to several threats, and first temporarily shut down the embassies and consulate throughout the Middle East, and then the second is to order a surge in drone strike in Yemen. But are these drone strikes effective? Is it just giving a false hope to US military and the intelligence? This is our today's topic, and we'll talk to our distinguished guest. Let me introduce the panel. They are joined us from United States. Stephen Lenman, radio presenter on Progressive Radio, based in Chicago, United States. He has also served in the US Army. He writes on major world and national issues and has written several books. Also on the audio we will have Asim Khan from London. He's been a PTI, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Movement for Justice in Pakistan supporter who vocally opposes the drone strikes for many years, and he has joined PTI as party in 2007, elected London president in year 2012, and at the moment he is serving around the world and including Pakistan he's talked about. So let me start with you, Stephen, please. Give us a background about the drone and its history.
Well, drones go back a long way, Saeed. They go back at least to the 1970s. And I believe in the Vietnam era, they began by being used for surveillance. But you begin one way and you escalate and you graduate to other ways. The technology increases, it improves. If you can imagine this, Saeed, by 2020, America plans to have somewhere on the order of maybe 20 to 30,000 drones overflying virtually every part of America. The idea is for monitoring, is for surveillance, but again, escalation is very, very simple. These will be the same kinds of predator drones. They could be armed with missiles. They can target anybody. If they can kill people abroad in other countries, they can target them and they can kill them in America, and make no mistake about it.
Okay, but you know, I mean, it's a multi-billion dollars industry. So what's wrong? Where it goes wrong? Is it more about privacy invasion, or more to do with the covert operations?
Well, it's got everything to do with war and peace, the way they're used. As far as monitoring goes, we can be monitored in many, many ways. We've found out many more ways. All of our emails can be read, our telephone calls can be listened to, satellites can monitor us from space, and drones can monitor us from 20 to 30,000 feet in the air. We can be monitored in all kinds of ways. In cities like Chicago, in New York, in London, these cities are infested with monitoring cameras. You can't go out on the street. You can't go into a public building. You can't go into a shopping mall. My goodness, maybe you can't go into a bathroom without there being monitors, cameras, and they're not easy to spot unless you're looking for them.
Okay. Let me get Asim from London now. Asim, 365 drone strikes since 2004, 313 of them under Obama regime, and killing almost 3,500 people, including 197 children. How does this resonate? I mean, does it make any sense to you, or?
I think it sort of it has to be taken in two formats. I mean, it makes sense if you were to think of that the way the Americans are basically wants to pursue its policies, and it for them is perhaps is the most cost-effective solution. But if I were to look at as a human being, as a Pakistani as well, and as a citizen of this world, it is the most inhumane and barbaric practice that has been raged on for many years. And the impact of that is obviously has been huge and catastrophic. I mean, if you were to basically think, the thing that it has led to is the instability as well, the extremism in Pakistan, and all the suicide attacks that are happening. And it's the composition of Pakistan, and especially in the tribal belt, that has dramatically changed. It has changed to such a degree that it's basically now, is the figures you've just quoted. I think the updated figures, I mean, they're going around 4,410 and so, and it's rising. And basically, and why they have done that is basically, is you have literally, they have violated all the international norms, laws, and regulations. All the human rights organizations are now basically have taken up on that as well. And then the violation of Pakistan's sovereignty as well. And it's basically a kind of, in summary, that it goes against the very principle which the West or the USA wants to uphold, i.e. the democracy, its values and system. But the approach they have taken is just completely defies the logic. I mean, the only thing visible to us in Pakistan, and I hope to the rest of the world as well, and people like Stephen are basically highlighting this, and is that it's total brutality. It's no inconsideration. And it's just going on and on. And we as a party basically, and our chairman Imran Khan, we have been saying these things for last so many years. In fact, last year the peace march to Waziristan was held as well, and a lot of organizations actually attended that. Code Pink was one of them.
Yeah, so also I would like to say that we are trying to get to Media Benjamin, who heads Code Pink, and hopefully she'll join us. Okay, please go ahead.
And it's basically a mixture of all these things where the USA has adopted a policy, which that policy is a policy of disaster. And as Stephen was saying, basically, that by the time year 2020, I mean, they're keen to have 20,000 to 30,000 drones. So imagine the composition of the whole world or a particular region where you're deploying all these things, and what would happen. So it's amazing that the whole concept, all the organizations that have been put in place, you have UN, United Nations, Security Council, all the other organizations in the world, if you ask them basically, is this the way to actually basically invade countries? Is this the way to actually go after people? What happened to the dialogue? I mean, isn't dialogue the basic principle of democracy, to get to a consensus or a decision?
But you know, I mean, if you talk from their perspective, and let me get in Stephen from here. I mean, their narrative or their official line, I would say, is that no official Americans die. So this is a more sort of defensive strategy they have. So what's exactly wrong with it if they don't want to go with their own troops?
The Americans are not dying, but the Pakistanis are dying.
Yes, initially they initiated the war, so they have to look from their defense perspective.
It's not the war was initiated by us. I mean, Americans, yes, as I said earlier on, I mean, that for their perspective, The casualties are hardly any. There is absolutely, it's cost effective. You cannot monitor, you cannot trace, you cannot shoot them down. And basically, it's the most easiest solution for these guys. But just imagine on the other side that the people who are dying, the majority of the people who are actually being killed are children, women, innocent people. I mean, if one were to say that, okay, one drone attack actually takes care of all the people they've had on their list, most of the time, I mean, the percentage is almost 5 to 10%. The rest of them are civilians. I mean, how do you justify that?
No, I understand. I'm not giving any justification.
I understand from your point of view that the narrative which they're building up, but that narrative is not necessarily the narrative which the rest of the world wants to hear or see. I mean, especially not in Pakistan. I mean, we've totally fed up with this, basically this narrative as well, and the way.
But I will come back to you and talk about this. That how government of Pakistan is, I would say, complicit in all this. Stephen, what's your take on that? Their defensive point of view or the defensive strategy? I mean, how do you look at it?
Well, I see nothing defensive about what's going on, Saeed. American policy is completely offensive. And the Pakistan government, on the one hand, claims it deplores the notion that America can launch drone strikes over Pakistani territory and kill Pakistani citizens. And on the other hand, silently behind the table, it does nothing to stop it. It goes along with U.S. policies. It's done so since 2001. I see no chance that this will change. Follow the policies. Ignore the rhetoric. American policies are belligerent. It's got nothing to do with self-defense. It's got everything to do with lawless aggression. Every war that America wages, direct wars, proxy wars, partial wars like against Pakistan, they're wars of aggression. They're illegal. They're absolutely unconscionable. There's no way you can go along with this. And the people who suffer most are innocent civilians. We can get into the kind of people that drone attacks kill. They kill a very small percentage of what America calls high-value targets.
Okay, let's talk more about high-value targets. Waliur Rahman, the deputy leader of Pakistan Taliban, Baitullah Masood, Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen, they all were killed by these drone strikes. And when US government wanted to capture Osama bin Laden, then two stealth goes in Pakistani territory and pick him up from there. So, I mean, is there any difference of opinion between the intelligence that if it's a high-value target, they can be killed and captured by the stealth, or innocent civilians can be killed by drones? Stephen, please.
Can I add a comment about bin Laden first?
Pardon?
Can I comment on bin Laden?
Yeah, please.
Well, let me be clear and unequivocal. Obama had nothing to do with killing bin Laden. You cannot kill a dead man twice.
So let's try to. Okay, please.
Well, the important thing I want to emphasize is that in July 2002, the New York Times, I wrote about this, and I quoted the New York Times directly. July 2002, the New York Times reported that bin Laden died of natural causes 6 months earlier. That would make it about December 2001. And he was, quote unquote, buried in southern Afghanistan. BBC reported the same thing. Fox News in America reported the same thing. I repeat, you cannot kill a dead man twice.
Okay, let's move on to drones now, please. So, I mean, do you understand, or do you what other options they have? Let's talk about the alternatives for American intelligence as well as CIA involved in all those activities.
Well, when you say options, Saeed, there's only one option for me. Illegal wars need to be stopped. How do they need to be stopped? The international community has to intercede and force them to stop. Forget the UN, forget the Security Council. America has a veto. It'll veto anything contrary to its interests, anything contrary to Israeli interests. Forget about it. The rest of the world, the free world, the international world, the Western world needs to get out from under U.S. policy, needs to say, we will not tolerate this anymore. We won't support it. We will go public on it. Pressure alone can end America's imperial wars.
But don't you think it's a very wishful thinking? I mean, on a human grounds, I understand there is a point, but from CIA perspective or from any American intels, I don't think this is going to happen. So do we have other alternatives while targeting those so-called terrorists in those territories? That how is it possible? Can we go through a district attorney or any federal judges? They can be involved?
Well, let me put it to you this way, Saeed. There have been a number of times in American history when the impossible became the possible. I've written about them. I've talked about them. I had an interview this morning, and I talked about them there. The biggest impossible achievement in America was ending slavery. It went on for hundreds of years. It went on before America became America, when there were colonists for centuries, and America had not yet become America. And how did it happen? Because a small group of committed people decided they would accept nothing less. It's amazing. Small groups committed for change can force governments to do what they never would have done if commitment wasn't sustained until achievement happened. It happened with ending slavery. It ended with civil rights. It ended with labor rights. It can happen with ending aggressive wars. If enough people get behind it, they can force their governments. There have been other things that have happened in America because people got behind issues, politicians, even in dictatorships. But it doesn't matter. In democracies, Adolf Hitler knew this. Hermann Goering understood this. He was interviewed at Nuremberg when he went on trial before he committed suicide. And he explained to a prison psychologist who asked him, how did the Germans ever go along with Nazi policies? And he said something to the effect that you can't expect farmers in their fields to want to go to war for any reason at all. You have to convince them there's a reason. You have to create a threat. You have to make them believe that their futures, their families could be harmed. You have to make them believe that they need to support something because they'll harm themselves otherwise. So even dictatorships, Saeed, understand that they cannot force their policies on people who won't accept them. They have to convince them. They have to propagandize them. Propaganda cuts both ways. But when it's truth-telling, it's not propaganda. It's spreading important information that people need to know. If they know government policies harm them, if they understand that their families are threatened, that's the best way to get things changed.
Okay.
It's happened in America. It's happened in many countries around the world.
But let me get Asim here. Asim, Code Pink has traveled to Pakistan. There were more than 50 activists who traveled to Pakistan and participated in the Waziristan March, which happened last year. But what were the end results? I mean, we're talking about awareness here, but where do you see it all going?
I think one of the first thing that actually the Waziristan Peace March actually achieved, that it was the first time that anybody from Pakistan had actually gone in there. There was no politician ever visited that belt. So the first point was basically to address is to bring that sense of cohesion and the togetherness that actually we do understand that there is an issue, and we do actually feel that this issue is not just necessarily tied in with FATA, it ties in with the whole concept of Pakistan basically. So the first thing was this, to reassure them that we in Pakistan and the political party, we are trying, and we have done already. I mean, there was, before we went to Waziristan, there were a lot of protests, there were a lot of sit-ins leading up to that as well, to highlight one thing very clearly, that Pakistan, we cannot have this war of aggression and in that form. And as Stephen was saying earlier on, the way to build pressure is not just necessarily the drone attacks, it's the whole concept of US foreign policy has to be examined. We cannot have this policy of aggression and is the militancy, where you literally remove all the threads of democracy and all the threads of dialogues. You put people, you do not put people on trial, you do not hear their side of story as well, and you just actually basically keep killing them. It's not just of Pakistan, it's the same thing is happening in Afghanistan, the same thing happened in Afghanistan, Korea, Vietnam, and there's a whole list of disasters basically going on from the 19th century onwards. So I think it's important that the free world, the West, and also obviously the regions in the East as well, I think it's not just the awareness, but people really have to realize the fact as well that whatever these things are happening, it would impact them as well. It would impact not just Pakistan, it would impact the whole region, and then it can flood off to other regions as well. So, and it's just, so we in Waziristan March were basically, the idea was very simple, that we need to reassure them that we're doing all we can and we understand the implications. At the same time, Code Pink and all the other organizations, the Wind thing, basically it was for them to see as well, so they can build the case in the international environment that this thing which is happening is just completely immoral.
Which,
it's completely
I mean, which in no doubt they have done that. Obviously, they have been leading protests all across the world. But you know, I mean, that was last year. This year, your party is in government in that region. I mean, I understand that your point of view might come across like that FATA, the Federal Administrative Territorial Area, is not part of KPK government. But still, I mean, what on ground you or your party has been doing since you've been elected?
Basically, since we have come into the government in KPK, I mean, one of the biggest issues is obviously is peace and order. I mean, it's law and security enforcement and all the other things. And we have numerously basically, again, it's not just the KPK government's issue. It's the issue of the whole country as Pakistan. It's the federal issue as well. It's the provincial issue as well. Until and unless, and Imran Khan has repeatedly actually urged the Prime Minister of Pakistan and also the Chief of Staff, General Pervez as well, Ashfaqiani, that they need to have a meeting so where they can actually sit together and see that what actually has been agreed, what is going on, for them to actually come up with a policy. There has been numerous resolutions that have been passed in the previous government as well, and even now as well. But the government seems to have turned a blind eye, basically.
So basically, what you're saying is that if Imran Khan is unable to meet the army chief in private, then there will be no policy.
Well, the policy is basically, I mean, it's the resolution that have been passed numerously in the parliament, the last government as well, and before that as well, and even now, everybody, it's very simple said. You have to see that as that it's a war. The drone attacks have to end, and for that to happen, basically, Americans have to leave their area. They have to vacate Afghanistan. They have to go through that. Basically, the process affects it.
But they have recently announced as well that they will not be leaving, as it was quoted in print media as well as electronic media. They will not be leaving in Afghanistan in 2014. There will be some forces who will be training. So I don't think that is going to happen.
Well, the thing is this, by 2014, I'm sure they will still love to sort of leave. A lot of sort of soldiers and all the infrastructure they have put in place over there. But the end result is always going to be said that if they want a peaceful area, if they want a total peace and stability in that region where you have Afghanistan, India as well, Pakistan and China, Americans have to realize this for once in their lifetime, that they cannot utilize these means of aggression. If they remain there, you can carry on with these debates for another 5 to 10 years time. In fact, the actual composition of this will even go even more bigger as well, because currently it's just one area. We know that the monitoring, the surveillance is all around Pakistan as well. They have air bases as well, and the Pakistani government seems to have turned a blind eye. And we are making our utmost best, basically, that we need to stop this. In fact, this is one of the things that we had said, that if PTI was to come in government, in federal as well, then the first thing would have been to be very open and very sort of straightforward that, guys, this has to stop. I mean, if you cannot have a dialogue, then this is not the means to actually go into Pakistan and into its tribal areas. So it's one of those things, say that, yes, the international pressure should be built as well, as people like Stephen and all the other organizations are playing playing important role. At the same time, the consensus in Pakistan, the people are fed up, basically. Every day we lose lives as a direct impact of these drone attacks and strikes. Every day we have lost more than 40,000 people as a reaction to all this war that has happened in Pakistan, basically. Every day there's a suicide attacks, there's basically the drone attacks. There are people, organizations that have sprung up, basically, they're criminal organizations, and most of them are being supported by the people like...
But I mean, I would beg to differ with this argument of yours that it's a more sort of reactionary approach. I mean, what Shias of Pakistan have to do with this suicide bombing which has been in place in Quetta, Karachi, and you name the part of the Pakistan and it's there. So, I mean, Punjabi Taliban wasn't created by America, is it right?
I think it's basically, a number of times it has been stated as well that sometimes it appears that the Americans are playing both sides. With the government of Pakistan as well, and also they are actually basically keeping the Taliban. The TTP, the composition of TTP, it appears to be totally different than the actual Talibans in Afghanistan. There are so many criminal groups that have sprung up that someone is using the name of the Punjabi Talibans, and the things that are happening in Quetta as well, the way the Shia has been butchered to death. So everything, I mean, the current defense secretary of USA is basically, Chuck Sagel has been saying that India has been involved. India is playing through Afghanistan everything that has happened. I mean, and everything is interlinked. If you look at the recent scenarios, I mean, right from the current sort of confessions of one of the secretaries in India that the Mumbai attacks and the attacks before, Pakistan had nothing to do with it. So everything is interlinked, and to make it more reactive, to make it more volatile, they actually want to have a Shia-Sunni sort of clash as well. They have the tribal belt covered off as well by basically the drones attack. So and the situation in Karachi, you cannot ignore the situation in Karachi is exactly the same patterns. Different means have been actually utilized, but in the end is to destabilize Pakistan, and through that stability, basically then just, okay, now we can walk over, and then India would have on the other side is waiting as well. I mean, look at India and the aggression they're showing, the media, and the narrative they're building up, basically. So I think we in Pakistan we are very careful, and we're monitoring that as well, that these scenarios that are building up, we just simply cannot take them lightly.
Okay, Asim, we just got to go for a break. And before I go to break, I want to pose a question to Stephen. We are talking about the complicit governments. So I'll talk to you when I come back after the break, that the governments in Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, what exactly they are doing from American, as an American journalist point of view. What is your take on that? So join us, viewers, after the break, and we'll talk to Stephen Lenman from Chicago and Asim Khan from London. Welcome back, viewers. We are joined by Stephen Lenman from Chicago and Asim Khan from London, and we are talking about drones. Most people know very little about drones, and we want everyone to begin to see the depth of the threat that drone presents to all. And before we went to break, I posed a question to Stephen Lenman regarding the complicity of the governments based in Yemen, Somalia, as well as in Pakistan. So let's take his point of view. Stephen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please.
Well, absolutely. Governments throughout the Middle East, North Africa, and Eurasia, with very few exceptions, are complicit with the worst of American, Western, and Israeli policy, the absolute worst. So they literally let these countries get away with murder. The exceptions, of course, are Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Assad in Syria, and the Iranian government with its new president, especially Hassan Rouhani, who I've written separate articles about twice. These are independent countries America doesn't tolerate. After 9/11, I believe it was Richard Armitage who put it to the Pakistani government that America would either shower Pakistan with billions of dollars or with bombs. Billions of dollars if America supported U.S. policy, which meant going to war with Afghanistan, which meant supporting it, which meant all of the ways that one country supports another, or if Pakistan objected, then America would go to war with Pakistan and would shower it with bonds. Well, the message got through, and it's been that way ever since. Pakistani governments support the worst of American crimes, but it's just as true in the other countries throughout the region, whether it's Jordan, whether it's Morocco, whether it's, oh my goodness, Iraq,
too many.
Yemen, Bahrain, Tunisia.
But you know, the countries you said that they are, with the exception, I think 3 of them already been declared terrorist state: Hamas, Hezbollah, as well as Assad's regime in Syria. So they won't buy your version. And also there is 66.3 billion arms trade, and that is a worth of export. That's the biggest export of America. So why would they want peace in these countries? And they have already allowed 66 countries to purchase drones. So
well, they don't want peace, they want war. Because if they had peace, they couldn't sell all these weapons.
That makes sense. Absolutely, that makes sense. But that's my point. So why would anyone like yourself or any activist, they are going or they are demonstrating against these drone strikes when they know there is no outcome other than making people aware of the issue?
Individuals demonstrate against the drone strikes, but America absolutely wants them. America thrives on war. Israel thrives on war. NATO allies thrive on war. The worst thing that could happen to either Israel, NATO, or America is for peace to break out. That's the absolute worst possibility. So if it does break out, America will go out of its way to facilitate, manipulate, create conflict, to have another war. America's policy is permanent war. It's at war perpetually with one or more nations. Direct wars, proxy wars, they're all illegal. You could go back as far as you want. World War II, before World War II, post-World War II, America has always been at war.
Okay, and what is the future? I mean, from a US or CIA point of view, the official status, I mean, can we change it? Is it possible?
It's always possible, and we better find a way to change it. Because if America doesn't stop fighting wars, you know the old saying, and I believe it, you live by the sword, you perish by it. Every empire in world history has gone the same way. It overreached, it overfought, it overspent, it died. America is no exception. The Roman Empire lasted hundreds of years. The American Empire has been what?
And okay, if we try, let me get in Asim, because I think there was a case in London High Court challenging drones, and it was rejected because of the classified documents involving in it. So I mean, there's no even legal avenues challenging these drone strikes all across the world. So what are the other avenues we can take?
I think, Said, basically, sometimes, as Stephen is saying as well, sometimes there are no alternatives. Societies countries find those alternatives as you go through that time period. Sometimes, I mean, for instance, when there was no electricity, they used to use a few other things. Then the electricity came, the inventions. It's a similar manner, basically, and it boils down to that: why do we, as activists, why do we actually do these things? And the answer is very simple: that the actual concept of a peace and a society, basically, which defies all these things, which needs to introduce all the peacefulness and the stability, it relies on justice. It's the sense of justice. And this is what is missing, basically, from all this Americans' argument, basically, to have waged the war of terror, and basically, there is no justice. So basically, as an individual, as a human, one has to follow the voice of conscience as well, that we are actually, and for that reason, you will see activists around the world. They don't necessarily have to have some different religions, but it's something that unites them, and it's the same way. And in Pakistan, basically, I think we are tired, basically, but at the same time, every day the consensus does build up that we cannot tolerate this anyway. We will find alternatives, and the best expression, basically, which is happening and we're witnessing now, is that the American imperialism and the American civilization, as to speak, is on its path of erosion and decline. That is the ultimate expression, that where nothing the rest will see, hear, say, they will not take that on board, basically. And the commerce and the currency of commerce and the currency of capitalism and the currency of democracy is actually the war for them. And this is where their downfall is already happened. So you cannot control these things, and they really have to step away from this, and they have to think inwards. Do you realize what is happening in USA internally? How often we actually hear about the situation that is currently going on in USA, the education issues, the financial issues, the total decomposition of everything, because of the fact that they're so alienated themselves from the people of America. We've always said we have nothing against Americans, but it's the policy, it's the foreign policy.
So it's mainly the foreign policy which has been...
Of course, it's the foreign policies of aggression. There is not a single element of peace in there. There is no dialogue. Imagine that they call themselves the superpowers and they call themselves the cradle of civilization. And imagine the height of arrogance when they actually go to Pakistan, that after 9/11, either you with us or you against us. What kind of dialogue is that?
So you support the argument that one should have dialogue in a civilized society, and I'm sure everyone does it. But my question is that if a U.S. official seems a terrorist, I mean, be it signature strikes, and I want Stephen to answer this, please, or any surgical strikes, they have been notified by FBI and CIA and other that these are the threat to national security. So what other options they have to eradicate those if they don't go after? Obviously, Obama, in the recent speech, he has promised once again that there will be fewer drone strikes. So what is wrong with it? I mean, can we satisfy the other activists with this notion that yes, we will continue to have drone strikes, but they will be fewer in numbers?
I would like to comment on that.
Yes, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Stephen?
It's not drones, but it's a very good example. Last Friday, he promised reforming NSA spying. We all know about NSA spying. It goes on a global basis. Goes on in Pakistan, goes on in America, goes on everywhere. Obama gave a press conference. He promised reform. What has he done as his first step? He appointed the head of U.S. National Intelligence, James Clapper, who went before Congress and lied and said America does not have a domestic spying program. Everybody knows America has a domestic spying program. He was forced to admit, well, I really didn't say that quite the way I should have. He fell on his sword. He admitted it, he lied, but he said it. Clapper will head a so-called independent monitoring group to see that America enforces NSA spying reform. It guarantees there'll be no reform whatsoever. The idea that America will continue its drone strikes is absolutely wrong-headed. They won't be curtailed, Saeed. They'll be increased.
They will be increased. And
Yes.
you have just mentioned NSA, so I want to bring in NSA and their PRISM and X-key score as well. Edwin Snowden, we all know about, got asylum. Obama has cancelled his scheduled meeting with President Putin. And obviously this implies that role of UK and Germany especially, that GCHQ was given 100 million US dollars by the Americans to give them the support what they need. So what is the solution? How can we come, which Asim is already referring to, dialogue to build this nation, to build all peace all around the world? What are the solutions? What are possibilities?
Well, there is no possibility by going to government and expecting them to do anything except by mass sustained pressure that can take years, years, because the big achievements around the world, including in America, didn't happen in months, didn't happen in a year or two. They happened in many, many years, and in some cases, it took decades. Pressure, sustained, people refusing to quit, and finally it gets through. I don't believe in violence. I think violence only begets more violence. America would have a legitimate right to come after me if I said, destroy America by force. I do not believe that. I believe it should be changed, but by nonviolent means. I want real democracy. I don't want fake democracy. I want peace. I don't want war. These are things everybody should want. Everybody should support, and if they're not willing to put their bodies on the line for it, then they don't deserve it. I'm willing to put my body on the line for it. I do it every single day. Again, I do it in writing. I do it in my media work, and literally every day of the week, 7 days a week, long hours. I know my government knows me, Saeed. They know me very, very well. They know where I am. They know what I believe in. They can come and get me anytime. If they think they're going to silence me, they've got another thought coming. The only way they can do it is lock me up or kill me. And I'm old enough to say, I can't say I don't worry about that, but I'm too old to say I simply won't. You
simply won't budge. Okay. All right. Asim, a very vocal stance by Stephen. How many people you can find nowadays who stand united with the people and who promote democracy, who share the same values and thoughts? I mean, it's really difficult.
Actually, if you remove all the government officials, all the intelligence agency, normal human beings, whether they're in Middle East and Pakistan and around the world, actually support the sense of justice, peace, and dialogue. I mean, referring to your earlier question that what if the FBI, CIA has the intelligence and it makes them basically legitimate to actually go and attack? Well, Colin Powell had given the wrong information. Iraq. Well, they have weapons of mass destruction. What happened in the end? It was nothing. So I think it's just this multiple dimension approach where you actually do the awareness as well, where you highlight, where you fight through writing, through interviews, through protests, through all the non-violent means that in order to actually bring governments, in order to bring an opinion to a different change, that this is not actually, I mean, just imagine. I mean, if Americans are basically getting billions of dollars through the arms trades, I'm sure there is an alternative where they can get more by not having war. I mean, isn't it better for them, for Americans, if one were to be thinking from the Americans' perspective as well and from the people in the government and Obama, that isn't it better for them, for America, to actually have regions and in the world where there is no war, rather than you introduce wars? They have literally spread themselves so thinly around the world that there are bound to be things like that. I mean, there are people always questioning. People are writing about it that they wanted to build Afghanistan. I mean, look, this is how they've built Afghanistan. Tony Blair used to say that, well, we will build the infrastructure in Afghanistan. How can you build a country through the means of war? I mean, all you leave is a trail of disasters and plunders. I mean, haven't they learned lesson from history? Do not they realize that what happened to Russia, Soviet Union? Do not they realize that actually the same fate awaits them American civilization is basically going well. If it is to be a civilization, if they're on the downhill. It is fast eroding, and they just have to buckle themselves up, and they have to start some serious questions that all these writers, all these activists in America who are highlighting this, they are actually saying something right. The people should be taken, their voices should be heard. If they don't want to hear a Pakistani voice, why don't they hear the voices of people like Stephen and all the others, people like Chomsky's and all the others who have been fighting for the right, for the justice, and for the sense of harmony? I mean, but obviously they're not interested. So obviously then you realize, okay, it's an agenda of those particular minds and the subsets where they actually want to pursue it relentlessly. America have pursued relentlessly these means of war in every single decade. In every single decade, there's the same patterns have emerged, and they still haven't learned. So I think it's about time people, and it will come. People do realize America cannot sustain this war. I mean, look at the space program. The Chinese have already launched their space program as well. By year 2020, the astronauts are learning Chinese, so their space program is already gone. So, and their military might, they cannot sustain that. They simply cannot sustain that. No country in the past and no country in the future can go like that. It's just simply undoable. So, but they will learn.
Okay, well, Stephen, let's try to wrap what we have discussed. We have discussed the background of these drone strikes. We have also highlighted American imperialism and its future. But I want to ask you a more US specific question here. Drone strikes now, let me not use this strike word, drone surveillance in states, there's been reported cases that you can buy drones for $300 US. And does not it violate the Fourth Amendment of US citizens?
Oh, absolutely violates the Fourth Amendment.
So why no one goes to any court procedure? I know there are 30 states who have already restricted areas where you can operate drones, but there are no restrictions all across the world where you can operate and where you can't.
Well, I defy any state to impose restrictions against Washington. If Washington wants to overfly a certain area, Washington will do what it wants. And of course, drones are only one instrument of surveillance or belligerence or any way possible. State and local police departments in America are militarized. They get combat weapons to go after their own people. So you can attack people from the air, you can attack people from the ground, you can attack them in multiple ways. And federal, state, and local authorities in America, foreign governments are complicit with the worst of U.S. policies. And the people who are harmed most are the innocent ones who should be protected. But they're the ones that are harmed. And the so-called bad guys are very, very small in numbers. Studies have been done. I've quoted a study in America done by New York University and Stanford University that says only 2% of the people killed by U.S. drones are called high-value targets. 2%.
And mainly they are civilians. But my question was that how many people you know in the United States who have challenged these drone surveillance in the United States? I mean, there are reports even environment protection agencies have drones for surveillance and drugs enforcement agencies as well.
It's the biggest problem I know, dismissiveness. Americans are dismissive. Even people who know a little bit, everybody knows about lawless NSA spying. Everybody knows about it. I don't see any protests in the street. I don't see angry people. I don't walk around my building and hear people saying, what are we going to do about this? People say, well, you know, I don't see any harm come to myself. I need to do this. I need to worry about that. I want to see this movie. I want to go shopping. They worry about all the wrong things, and the things that touch their lives and harm them and their families, they're dismissive enough. And I could put it this way, because of their attitude, they let America get away with murder.
With murder. Okay. Last questions to both of you. Asim, you technology consultant yourself. What is the future of drones? 66 countries to buy drones. Countries like India has recently violated Pakistani airspace. for some seconds with the drone.
Yeah.
Israel has also used drone over Egypt and killed some 6 militants in there, according to reports. So everyone is buying these new drones, I would say. So where are we heading?
I think it's basically, it goes back to the same thing. Is we heading towards those the times where you will wage wars, invisible enemy basically, and it's a great market for drones, and for all these countries who are actually lining up to buy them. All these countries have obviously have certain things to hide from, and they just want to follow the same model which the Israel and the Americans and the rest of the world, the rest of the West actually wants to follow. But the thing is this, that it just is the amount. I mean, and there will come a time when the Americans will also be pushing the technology to how to sort of bring the drone down. So they will be working on both alternatives as well. So it's just, I think it's, people have to, the governments of the world, people in the East, people in the West, the governments, the intellectuals, the writers, the academia and the activists, they all have to open their eyes up basically that this is not what the world should look like. This is not what the Americans should be doing. I mean, why can't they invest their intellectual expertise and for something to actually reduce hunger, to bring an end to TB, to bring an end to famine? Why these governments are not doing these measures, rather than actually why they have left it to the organizations, to the charity organizations, instead of actually focusing on killing people and for interests like oil and these things. They really have to change their narrative. They need to change their direction. And until they change their direction, as Stephen was saying earlier on as well, that the Americans are generally very dismissive because it doesn't affect them, so they don't bother. But they will come. But do
they will come a time?
But do the natural disasters actually do affect them, and they do bother? So isn't it something to learn from the experience that there will come a time, the earthquakes will come as well. All the other sort of natural disasters will take place. There may be countries and islands that may be totally wiped off. So isn't it better to actually follow something which is more constructive and beneficial for the whole humanity, rather than serving the interest of like 1 or 2% of people in the whole world, basically for all the wrong reasons? So I think it's a wake-up call, but we will actually keep highlighting the stance, and as a Pakistani, as a PTI person as well, that in Pakistan, we simply cannot tolerate these kind of things. And we will constantly raise voices at all international forums, and our friends like Stephen and the Media Benchman and all the other organizations, we are with them, they're with us. And inshallah, the time will come that we will see a different approach. It will see a different end.
Okay.
So the end. So,
okay, Stephen, your last 1 minute, please. 3,500 to 4,000 people died of these drone strikes over the last 7-8 years. In 2004, there was only one drone strike, and over these 8-9 years, we have seen so many. What is the future?
Well, first of all, Saeed, I think the number of people killed is probably much, much greater than the official numbers, because the official numbers are always understated. What do we do about it? You have to believe in the impossible. I believe in the impossible every day. I believe in hope. I believe the worst thing I or anybody could do is to lose hope, because if you lose hope, you lose everything. The great struggles are won because people believe in achieving the impossible, and when they believe it long enough and seriously enough, things happen that never would happen any other way. I will go to my grave believing in this and taking it with me. And I do believe, Saeed, that because of whatever I do, small and simple as it is, maybe it'll affect other people. Maybe they'll pick up the baton while I'm still here, after I'm gone, and they'll carry on, and maybe they one day will achieve what I was never able to do, but maybe I will have laid a few important bricks, and I'm dedicated to doing it. I can't imagine doing anything less important than that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stephen. We wish you very well for your future endeavors, as well as Asim. Thank you very much for joining us. And viewers, we have talked about drones, its background, as well as what is happening now and what future holds. $89 billion over the next decade. This is the industry estimate that this is a market which will, and US will be benefiting from it, as there are 66 countries who are ready to buy these drones. A plan of bombing and hoping, as quoted by Guardian. Let's hope that we can coexist and we can share the values of true democracy as well as living as true human beings. With this prayers, as always, गम हमको न दे सिवाय गम शब्बीर, शब्बीर का गम बांट रहा है तो इधर दे. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad.